Hey guys,
Who are you?
I'm Gwen Stacy. I'm from another dimension.
How many more spider people are there?
Hey, fellas.
Hello.
This could literally not get any weirder.
It can get weirder.
Hey, it's Mike and Meg here, and we're going to talk about Spider-Man Into the SpiderVerse, which I think I can safely say is the craziest comic book movie we've ever seen.
Yes.
We both also saw Aquaman recently.
Yes.
So.
I mean, it's a
also
close
insane,
race.
but this movie is crazy and it's amazing, and we're going to tell you all about it. But first, subscribe to GameSpot Universe for breakdowns, reviews, everything else about the stuff you love. Okay, Meg, first I wanted to ask you about something that you wrote in your review,
Yes.
which went up this morning on GameSpot.com. You wrote that it's a comic book movie, not a movie based on comic book characters.
Yes.
And I wanted to get into that a little bit
Absolutely.
to start off, because you're totally right.
It is 100% a movie that is literally comic book panels put on the screen and animated. And it's like halfway between a motion comic, like, you know, that was like a trend that happened, where they would kind of like animate, you know, panels, but not properly animate them. So it's that and like an actual animated feature kind of blended into one in like the perfect balance.
And there's whole scenes where it's just normal animation.
Right.
And then it just like randomly will just start experimenting.
Exactly.
Like a scene transition will happen, then suddenly we're literally looking at comic book panels.
Right, and it'll have, you know, like there'll be thought bubbles, and like the Comic Sans will type itself out as people have, you know, like internal monologues, which is a super comic booky thing. There'll be like panel breaks in the middle of scenes.
And there's no logic to it. It's
No.
just kind of like everything is just kind of thrown in at random.
Yeah.
It has this breakneck pace.
Right.
But it completely works for some
It does,
reason.
and you almost want to say it feels like a music video, but like I feel like when people say that, they mean it in like, you know, kind of a
like a bad
disparaging way.
In like a bad Zack Snyder kind
Yes,
of way.
exactly. Like
It's not like that.
No, it does. It works. It completely works. It's got that like really frantic pace, but it keeps it moving forward. It doesn't feel like a distraction.
And then it also kind of has that like unforgiving, like we're not going to spend time introducing Wilson Fisk.
Right.
We're
No,
not
no,
going to
no,
spend
no.
time. It assumes that we know all these characters like
Yes.
the comic book would, and it's like it's very unapologetic about like weird like pseudoscience,
Right.
junk like nonsense.
No.
It's like it's just like unabashed, unapologetic. It like is a comic book.
Yes, exactly. And like I appreciate that about it because I feel
Yeah.
like, I mean, even now, there's superhero content is so saturated. You don't need to tell us that Wilson Fisk is the kingpin of New York. Like, you don't need that. You don't need an introduction for Green Goblin.
Right, even if you haven't read Spider-Man comics, like I know about Fisk mostly
Right.
from Daredevil or from
You would just
the
know.
PS4 game Spider-Man
Right.
that came out this year. So like everybody
Exactly.
knows who Wilson Fisk is at this point. We don't need to
Exactly.
dwell on it.
No.
Before we get any further, we are going to get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen Spider-Verse yet, just go see it. Okay. So let's talk about the story for a second. So Miles Morales, who everybody is kind of familiar with at this point, he is the other Spider-Man.
Right.
The other Spider-Man.
Right.
He's like my Spider-Man at this point.
I think he's a lot of people's Spider-Man. Like
Yeah.
he was the Spider-Man who was introduced as part of the Ultimate Comics line, which was designed to be kind of like an intro for people who didn't want to go through, you know, 70 years of history. And so Miles was introduced after, during the Ultimate line, which reintroduced a new Peter, started at his origin story. Miles became Spider-Man after that Peter died. So basically the plot of the movie. And so Miles has got this kind of hero's mission that he has to go on with no idea how to go on it, what to do, how to stay alive while doing it, because clearly he just saw like a very experienced hero get murdered in the process, and so he's terrified.
He's really thrown into the deep end,
Yes.
and you totally feel it. And
Yes.
there are like moments, like obviously the arc of the movie is going to be he eventually figures it out,
Right.
But you really feel like his struggle, and there are moments when it feels like, oh, he's never like he's f***ed. And the movie
Right,
could
he's
go in
never
that-
gonna do it.
It like obviously the movie can't go in that direction, but it
Sure.
feels like Like it just does a really good job pacing it out and really leaving it until the very last second for him to finally figure it out. And then when he does, I don't know about you, it's super emotional.
Oh my God, yeah, it's super satisfying
Yeah.
too. It's done in this like very beautiful sort of like montage with this great song that I left the theater and immediately opened Spotify and was like, I'm gonna find that song. And now I just listen to it all the time because it's such a cool like motivator. But yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's a really, really cool like cap of that arc.
All right, so what did you think of Shameik Moore as Miles?
Oh my God, I thought he was perfect.
Yeah.
I thought he was absolutely pitch perfect. He has the exact right amount of like kind of befuddled innocence, but at the same time, he's like completely relatable. He does this thing, there's this song that is like played through, it's the Post Malone Sunflower, I think is what it's called, but he like mumble sings it to himself to calm himself.
He doesn't actually know the words?
He doesn't actually know the words. And I had this moment, I just started laughing so hard because I've been listening to that song too, and I also don't know the words. So when you sing it, it's like,
Needless to say, I keep watching. She was on back, nevertheless. Calling it quits now, baby, I'm a wreck. Bring me a wreck.
and like you know the rhythm of it, but he nails it so well
But
and
there's
so perfectly.
so many little touches in the movie like that, like just little character things, little details
Yes.
that make everybody feel like a real, maybe except for Spider-Ham, but we'll get
Right,
to
but I feel like that's very.
we'll get to that. What about Jake Johnson as Peter B. Parker?
I didn't really know who Jake Johnson was, and
Oh,
I
really?
know that like
Yeah,
I'm not
a new girl.
No, I'm
fan?
not a New Girl fan. So like I had
am.
no like context for him. And at first when the trailers were happening, I was a little worried that he was gonna be too kind of jerky or like too kind of like over the top as a sort of like deadbeat Peter. Which I mean it could have worked, but I was a little concerned about that. But it,
Well, they like when they introduce him and they do his whole backstory thing. I feel like it's
Yes.
like, it really makes sense why he is the way he
Exactly.
is.
Yeah, no,
the things that he's been through.
they completely sell him. He does such a great job of being that like deadbeat, like I don't want to do this kid guy who you can tell he has like a tender heart underneath. Like he's still Spider-Man. And I thought he struck that balance like perfectly.
Yeah, and it totally makes sense why he's like that.
Yes.
And the movie also does this thing whenever it introduces a new Spider-Man or
Yes.
a new Spider person, they go, all right, let's do the intro thing one more time.
Yes.
We promise is the last one. It never is.
It's never the last
It's never the
one.
last one. But they essentially each new Spider person tells their origin story. So
Right.
when you meet Peter B. Parker in sort of the cemetery scene,
Yes.
he tells you, why he is the way he is and how he got there.
Yes. And it's very funny.
Yeah. So let's talk about the other Spider people.
Yes.
There's Spider-Man Noir.
Yes.
Who is Nicolas Cage, who's just doing Nicolas Cage.
Oh my God.
But is so funny. He maybe
So
has like
funny.
6 lines the whole movie. Like he's there. He
Right.
doesn't talk a lot.
No,
Like
which I
there-
mean I think is appropriate for his whole like the best thing about the other Spider-Men in this movie is the fact that all of them are animated with different styles.
Yeah.
And so Spider-Man Noir is completely in black and white. He's always windswept, which Miles like notes. He's like, we're inside.
It's one
How-
of the best jokes.
It's
Where is
so
this wind
funny.
coming from? We're in a basement. He goes, wherever I go, the wind follows.
Oh, it's so funny.
It's so good.
Wherever I go, the wind follows. And the wind, it smells like rain.
And then Spider-Ham, who's
yes.
John Mulaney.
Who is a Looney Tune.
He's one of my favorite comedians and just absolutely kills it.
Oh my God, so funny.
Yeah, he's animated like a Looney Tune. Like he drops anvils on people
Yeah.
and hits people with a giant hammer.
He gives
mallet.
Miles the hammer like as his like parting gift. He's like, here, take this. It'll fit in your pocket, which is so fun. It's just perfect. And he has that, John Mulaney like dry sort of like awkward delivery for everything. Like he's never quite sure if what he's about to say is going to be funny or not.
Yeah.
Which is, it works. It just
Yeah.
absolutely works.
And then there's Penny Parker.
Yes,
who is
Spider.
Kimiko Glenn.
Yes.
And her mech thing is SPDR.
Yep.
And she
Spider.
has, this is the one I was most confused about that maybe you can help explain. But
Yeah.
there is an actual spider in the mech with which she has a psychic connection.
Right, yeah.
And that's how
Kimiko
she-
doesn't actually have spider powers herself. She has a psychic connection to the spider, which then pilots the mech or helps pilot the mech that she can kind of go into.
Can you explain why?
Not really.
She has comics, right?
Yes, she does. She's part of, God, I don't even remember what she's actually from. She's from the manga-verse, I'm pretty sure.
Cut here and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't...
So anyway, she's from the comics.
She's from the comics. She's part of the actual comics version of the SpiderVerse stuff that's going on, which is a thing. There's SpiderGeddons happening in Marvel right now. The SpiderVerse has been part of the comics for quite some time, but she's just from another Earth. She, I think, lost her dad or her uncle. I don't remember which one.
In the movie, it's Dad.
Dad, yes. So she has a psychic connection for this mech suit that is called Spider with like SB//DR that she can use to.
It's very good. She's basically Diva from Overwatch,
yeah.
and
her name is Penny, and it's cute.
Yeah, it's cute. I
She's
love
very
her.
cute, and she's animated like an anime character, obviously.
Yeah.
And she's great.
So most importantly, we have SpiderGwen, who actually does not call herself SpiderGwen in the movie. She is Spider-Woman.
Right.
Yes.
Which, I mean, Spider-Woman is what she's called in the comics as well. Like, that's her official. Spider-Gwen is kind of her moniker, I guess. I mean, it's the title of her comic.
But everybody calls her SpiderGwen. So
right, because there is a Spider-Woman who is Jessica Drew, who is like the normal Spider-Woman. And so it gets confusing if you don't call her Spider-Gwen.
Comics get confusing?
Yes, comics get confusing sometimes.
Anyway,
but yeah.
She was great.
Yes.
Haley Steinfeld.
Yes.
And I loved her.
Okay, then.
The way that Spider-Verse opens is that like the night before the first scene of the movie, there was an earthquake that only gets talked about as like a passing thing. Like, oh, Miles, did you feel that earthquake? And she apparently came through the Spider-Verse like catastrophe or whatever that night. And so she came before all the other Spider people.
I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, she came.
I need to rewatch this movie.
That's why she was there before Miles got his powers and everything. Like, that's why she was there for Uncle Aaron to like tell him how to flirt with her.
I literally did not even think about that, but you are correct.
So she's there. She was the first other Spider person to come through, and so that's why she was at the school.
So there is a lot.
There's a lot going on in this movie.
It is a busy.
It is, and I think
I didn't have any problems watching it though.
No. I think if this movie would have come out 5 years earlier, we would have been screwed. Like, it would not have worked. But now, when we live in this world with the MCU and the quantum realm, and Thanos is able to snap his fingers and kind of destroy half the universe, and everyone's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. We get it now.
So that's kind of a good segue into the next thing I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
which is, do you think this movie is too weird for... You're a comics person.
I am.
I'm more of like, I see all the movies.
Right.
I've watched every season of every Netflix show, which not a
That's
lot of people
a feat.
not a lot of people can say. So like, I know who Kingpin is.
Right.
You know who Kingpin is. Nobody else knows. Like, if you haven't read comics, if you're not keeping up with this, you don't know who Kingpin is. Like, do you think that this movie does a good job introducing those characters for non-comics fans? And do you think it gets too weird?
I do think it does, but I also think it understands it is not a movie for people who have been kind of living under a rock and like not participating in kind of pop culture for a while. And so if you're maybe a befuddled parent who is just going with your child who is like the world's biggest, Spider-Man fan, you're gonna be a little lost. But I don't necessarily think that's a fault of the movie. I think that it's earned the right now, especially like in this kind of climate, that like it's allowed to make those assumptions.
I mean, it's
not weird.
I don't think it's as bad as like Infinity War. If you haven't seen the 19 movies preceding
Right,
it,
no.
you're screwed.
Yes.
I think this movie actually does, like we said, it goes over the Spider-Man origin story separately for each of these characters in a way that explains who all of them are. You understand? Right. Like Kingpin is like, if anything, he's more of an archetype. Like, I think you get just from the way that he is drawn, which is just this
he's
massive,
so stylized. It's so funny.
He's like a house. Like, and his head is this lump in the middle. That he has no neck. His shoulders are just like
way
his head
higher
is like in the middle of his
yeah.
body. It's so weird and so cool.
It's very weird.
But you understand everything you need to know about Kingpin, I think, just
based on that. Yeah, and I think that it does do a very good job of kind of briefing people, because it's assuming, and it has the right to assume, that you know who Peter Parker is, and like you know what Spider-Man can do, which I think even if you've never seen a Spider-Man movie, even if you've never picked up a comic in your life, you have some idea that like when someone says Peter Parker, you're like, okay, it's Spider-Man, like I get it.
Yeah.
And I think it does a good job of like kind of existing in a happy medium where it doesn't over-explain, but it works. I don't think it's too confusing.
I agree. I don't
Yeah.
think it's too weird at all. Even though, I mean, it does, like, we're talking about alternate dimensions
Yes.
and other timelines, and
It is the most comic booky comic book stuff in the world that it could possibly be.
I'm excited that we've like got to this point in pop culture
Yes.
where we can have Infinity War
and it's just like, oh, it's fine.
and SpiderVerse and like even Deadpool 2, like
Right.
so meta and like so much self-referential, self-aware
Yeah.
stuff in all of these movies this year.
Yes.
It's a good year for comic book movies.
It is.
May, do you think that the animation style is going to be hard to get used to for people? I guess like I've heard that concern.
I mean, I think it's definitely got a visual language that it's speaking very fluently and it's expecting you to just adapt to it. And if you're unwilling to kind of play by those rules, you're gonna struggle with it a little bit because it's definitely not like any other animated movie that we've seen
Yeah, I've never
this year
seen
or
any,
otherwise.
I've never seen anything like it.
Right, no. And so if you're like an extreme purist for any sort of like traditional animation style, you might struggle a little bit, but I think that's kind of a killjoy thing to be.
Yeah,
like
I
that's
don't
like
get
the
it.
no fun police.
I don't get it. Like it can be a little bit jarring, I guess.
Right.
But like I, for one, quickly got used to it.
Yes.
And then I just like, I ate it up. Like
Yeah.
every time it just like switched to new animation style or introduced some new like conceit or motif of how it was gonna portray something, I was just like, okay.
Right.
Like the final confrontation, which
It's like a kaleidoscope
Yeah,
of
that's
universes.
yeah.
Like it's bizarre and like super surreal, but very just like stylishly done.
but it also somehow is cohesive.
Yes.
Like there are buildings popping in and out of this. It all takes place in the giant, what do they call it?
It's like a subway station type thing. It's
But
like
it's like this giant, it's essentially like the huge tunnel.
The, like, collider thing, yeah.
the collider, where they're like, this beam has just caused all, like buildings are popping in and out
Right.
of existence, bridges and people and trains and
Yeah.
cars and everything is just going in and out. And somehow I can still read that action scene.
Yeah.
Like it's all of the spider people and all of the villains in the movie, which includes like Green Goblin, Scorpion,
Yes.
like
I
Tombstone is
forgot
there.
about Scorpion. Yeah.
Kingpin is in there, like so many characters, so many different smaller fights
Right.
happening, and yet the whole thing feels
It makes sense.
It's super readable.
They
like,
do a good job of color coding each Spider-Man has a very distinctive color palette. And so they do a really good job of like, even when there's all this stuff happening on the screen, it still works and is readable because like, you know, if it's black and white, you're dealing with noir. And if
yeah,
it's,
and it's sometimes it's just like the background color.
Right,
when
exactly.
The background color gets darker.
and like, if you know, if it's like an electric color, it's probably Penny. And if you know, it's got like Looney Tunes style, like thick lines and kind of
There's
two-dimensional.
musical cues for that stuff too.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like they do a very nice job of kind of constructing and choreographing everything around these
Yeah,
fights.
you can tell like how much thought went into making it.
Right.
Making it so you can always tell what's going on. and
Exactly.
it never feels like it's just throwing things at the
No.
screen. Speaking of the color palettes, I just want to talk real quick about one of my favorite jokes, which is Spider-Man Noir trying to solve a Rubik's Cube, but he only sees it in black and white.
Right, he can't see in color because he only sees it in his own color palette and he just can't figure it out. So it's perfect. God.
It's so good. It's just like a small thing that gets brought up 2 times
Yes.
and is just
And now that I'm remembering
perfect.
Scorpion, this Scorpion it's more Ultimate Scorpion and he speaks Spanish. And he actually, when he speaks Spanish the first time, he bursts into the scene and he says something in Spanish and it gets a world balloon above his head
Yeah.
that says star translated from Spanish, which is the most comic booky thing. And it has like the little brackets over, instead of getting like a traditional subtitle,
Yeah.
he gets a word balloon with the brackets around it. And it's just perfect. It's
perfect.
so good.
So I think that one of the main reasons why the movie works is the sort of relationship between, like, basically the main trio is
Right.
is Miles,
Gwen.
Peter,
And
Gwen,
Gwen.
and Peter B. Parker.
Right.
So first off, let's talk about like the sort of reluctant mentor
Yes.
structure between Miles and Peter, which is something that we've seen a million times. It's like, we just saw it in The Last Jedi, right? Like, you have to
Right.
train me. I don't want to. Okay, like,
Right.
it should be boring, but it's not.
It's
Why?
not boring.
Why is it not boring?
I think it's not boring because it's fresh in this sense because we're so used, especially now that like Tom Holland is Peter Parker, we're used to that sort of like bubbly, fresh face, always, you know, golly gee Willikers, Peter Parker. Whereas like,
I don't think Tom Holland ever said that.
no, he doesn't, but I'm gonna put those words in his mouth because I can see them, I can hear them coming out in his voice.
Gee Willikers, Mr. Stark.
Yes!
I don't want to go, Mr. Stark. Sorry. I'm sorry.
But like we're used to Peter Parker being that sort of like, he's always the good guy. Like the only time you ever really see Peter Parker being that kind of like deadbeat is when he has some sort of like outside influence, like, you know, like, oh, the Venom symbiote is making him like a bad guy or whatever. But otherwise he's, you know, like the Peter Parker we know in our consciousness is always kind of that guy who's just always gonna do the right thing.
So it was unique to see this specifically to see Peter Parker in this role.
Yes,
of the
exactly.
reluctant mentor.
And like, cause he's still got that wit, he's still funny, but he is also just like tired, and like that's relatable. Like he's trying his best, but he's so over it.
Yeah, a lot of the time when we see this kind of trope, it's you only relate to the, like in The Last Jedi, I do not relate to Luke Skywalker.
No.
I relate to Rey, and I kind of think Luke Skywalker is being a dick, and a lot of people even thought that that wasn't even a faithful portrayal of Luke Skywalker.
Right.
Whereas in this version, you relate to both people. Like Miles needs to get, somebody needs to show him the ropes, or else Brooklyn is gonna get blown up in a giant black hole. But on the other hand, for Peter, I fully understand why he's not interested.
Exactly. Like I think they're both on equal playing fields in totally different ways. Like neither of them has more power than the other. Like
in the relationship.
you learn that like Peter has to get back to his universe. He has to help Miles because he's gonna die if he doesn't. Like he can't stay, the disparate Spider-Men can't stay in Miles's Brooklyn, or else they're gonna like shatter into atoms or whatever, you know, sci-fi thing. And so he has to get back, but like his then internal debate is whether or not it's even worth getting back because his life has gone so far off the rails.
Yeah, that too, and like whether or not it's like he's not interested. His whole thing with the MJ of his universe is he doesn't want to have kids.
Right.
And he's not interested in training this kid. Like how old is Miles? Like 15?
Yeah, he's like 14 or 15.
He's not interested. He doesn't want to do it. And he doesn't, like, he's gonna pop back to his universe. This universe can get sucked into a black hole for all he cares. Right? And it's, they really sell the fact that he is that jaded. Right, yeah, he's very jaded, but he's also, he knows in his heart that it's the wrong thing to do. Like, he knows that, and so, like, that conflict plays out so well because he's trying to kid himself that he's not actually invested in what happens. Like he's trying to like, oh, like I'm gonna scam Miles out of like buying me food because I'm broke and I'm hungry. You have money, right?
Right, it's very funny. But he does, like he sells it in a way that it works. Yeah. So it's good.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about Gwen and Miles? Surprisingly, the movie does not take them. I mean, surprisingly, if this was a normal movie, I would expect their relationship to turn romantic at some point. And obviously, Miles has a crush on her. She's like she's like 15 months older than him or something.
It's like, very cute.
So she's an older woman. She's very appealing to him. But the movie never goes there. They're just friends.
There's a funny like kind of running gag in the whole thing about Uncle Aaron trying to teach Miles to flirt, and like it actually like circles back around in this really wild way into the final fight, which is very, very funny. But Miles is like very much a kid who's just trying to figure himself out, and so I don't even know if he necessarily has like a genuine crush on Gwen, or if it's just like a girl paid attention to me, like she's new, oh no,
like an awesome girl,
right? Exactly, like this girl's so cool, and so I think it's such a cool way to take that, where it doesn't get romantic at all. Like they end the movie literally just being like, okay, we're friends, right? And Miles,
there's a moment where I thought they were gonna kiss.
Yes, and I'm so glad that they didn't.
I like part of me wanted them to.
I didn't want it.
Because it's cute and I like them, and I just like romance.
Sure.
But then the rest of me is like, could we just not for one movie? Maybe we just not. You don't need it. Just don't have to do it.
And they work together, and like Miles doesn't have any sort of like resentment for it. Like he's not like, oh, why didn't we? Or like, oh, the girl I liked.
He doesn't feel like friend zoned or any
No,
stupid
it's
shit like
perfect. Like he's just like through the course of the movie, he's grown so much that he's realized that like this girl's awesome and he's her friend now, and like that's great. That's perfect.
The fact that she goes back to her own universe by the end was the one thing in the whole movie that I was like a little bit sad about.
Yeah.
And then right at the very end, somehow, I don't need to know how, I don't care.
know.
Somehow a portal opens above his bed and she goes, hey, you got a minute? Like
Yeah.
implying
It's so
implying
good.
that they like keep their friendship up and have
Right.
some sort of way to communicate with each
yeah,
other.
they've got like interdimensional cell phones that
It's
are going on.
whatever
yeah.
it is. But it's a perfect example of the way that this movie hits every detail that I'm
Right.
like, I hope they address this, or I hope they
Sure.
tie that loose end up. Everything gets dealt with.
Yes.
What did you think of the Uncle Aaron as Prowler reveal?
I was a little confused at first, and I know you weren't, but I thought, because there's that scene that was the Venom post-credits, and like we've seen it a bunch of times prior to the movie's release, where Prowler is chasing Miles, who's out of costume, right after Miles gets his powers, and like right before Peter B. Parker shows up.
Yeah.
And so he's chasing him because Kingpin told him to chase him. I assumed...
Kill that guy.
Yeah, exactly. Like I assumed that Prowler, because he's kind of like Iron Man in this universe. Like he's got all this tech. He sees
Iron
things
Man with sharp
right. He's got like claws.
kitty claws.
But he like sees things in like infrared, almost like a predator. I assumed that he knew that he was chasing Miles. And so I was ready for that like kind of like moment of like there to be like a betrayal there, where like Uncle Aaron has not been a good guy. He's not been a good influence this whole time. Like he knew that it was Miles, whatever was happening.
Yeah, it just
But-
doesn't. Well, Miles has his hoodie up and it's
Right.
dark and he's chasing him, so.
Now that I've like watched it, I get that he didn't know, and I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But I was a little confused at that part.
I don't think I would have suspected that. Like in retrospect, it's very obvious the way the movie does it. Like
Right.
he hangs out with Uncle Aaron, and then every time he tries to call, as soon as Prowler is introduced, every time Miles tries to call Uncle Aaron, like
Right,
for
he
advice
can't
or
reach
whatever,
him.
he's I'm out of town.
Right.
Those things match up like very obviously. But I don't think I would have known that if you hadn't told me ahead of time.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I don't know. It's hard for me to judge that one because I obviously knew that Aaron was Prowler. Like that's a pretty major part of Miles's arc from the comics. It's also been kind of insinuated as something that might be happening in the MCU because Donald Glover plays Uncle Aaron in that cameo in Homecoming. So like I've known, like people who have been paying attention know that Aaron is Prowler. It's like I wasn't surprised.
Right. I felt that they could have spent a little bit more time. It's like it's such a packed, busy movie.
Yes.
And it's not like a plot hole or anything.
No.
It's just I kind of like the one question I left the theater with was like, why was Uncle Aaron Prowler?
Right. Like you
how
need an
was
origin for him.
Right. Why was he working for Fisk? Like why was
Right.
he evil? I thought he was like a pretty cool guy. But
Yeah, they kind
guess
of
not.
insinuate because Miles's dad is a cop, and so you learn that like Miles's dad has very much severed contact with his brother.
Yeah, they had some kind of falling out.
Right,
and
exactly.
It never really addresses it.
It doesn't really address it, but it's kind of implied that like one of them, like they went on divergent paths. One of them went, very lawful good. One of them went kind of lawful evil. And that's why they didn't, that's
Sure,
why
yeah.
they can't reconcile.
Just throw a D&D.
Sorry. I'm gonna make this even nerdier. It's whatever. But I think that works. I don't know. I would be interested to see what someone's going in totally blind who has
Yeah.
no idea, like if they could telegraph that or not. Because
Okay, so let's talk about the good and the bad.
Right.
Here is the good, literally everything.
everything
Every single element of this movie is
good.
good.
I would not change a single thing
Yeah,
about
the
it.
visuals
Yes.
are amazing.
Yes. The
And
soundtrack is amazing.
The soundtrack is so good, and the sound design on top of
Yes.
that. Like we talked about the Prowlers.
So good.
There's so many good. Like Spider-Ham has his own musical cues that are
Right.
like Looney Tunes.
It's
gags.
perfect.
All of the characters,
Yep.
I think were perfectly cast. There
Yep.
were a couple that we didn't even talk about, like Aunt May is
Lily Tomlin.
Lily Tomlin.
Yeah.
is perfect.
Perfect.
And it's such a cool portrayal of Aunt May
Yeah.
too. Like
she's
Aunt May knows exactly what is up.
Aunt May is like the Alfred Pennyworth of this
Yeah.
universe. Like she's on it. They introduce the like kind of other Spider-Man, like Gwen, Peter, and Miles come together separately, and then they all kind of end up at Aunt May's house. And then that's how the other Spider-Men come in, because they
Aunt
all...
May is like, you guys didn't think you were the only ones,
yeah,
right?
like Aunt May has
Aunt
just
May
become
is
this mecca
with
of... Yeah, she's perfect.
The story like makes sense.
Yeah,
Somehow
against all odds.
Yeah, I was worried about that going in. I was like, there's no way they're gonna make this make sense. There's no way they're gonna make Peter Parker and Miles Morales and a cartoon pig and Nicolas Cage in black and white and some
little
person
anime
in a
character,
mech.
yeah.
There's no way they're gonna make all this work in a way that makes sense with Kingpin and Green Goblin, all these other villains,
No.
and somehow it completely works.
It completely works. It doesn't feel bloated. It doesn't feel over the top. It feels exactly as as campy and as fun and as sci-fi as it needs to be.
And there's emotional stakes in this movie that are like so real, like on a larger sense. Yes, Brooklyn is gonna get sucked into a black hole, but it's not a universe-ending thing.
No.
It's the real core of it is in the relationship between Miles and Peter.
Right.
Miles' own struggle to, like, he's surrounded by these other spider people.
Right.
Every single one of them, except for him, has been a spider person for at least 2 years. I
Right.
think Gwen says 2 years.
Yeah.
And so he's the least experienced.
Yeah, he doesn't know
And-
what he's doing. He wants to do well. He has all these, there's this motif, like the thing that he was graffitiing the night he got bit was he had gotten an assignment at school about Great Expectations, which is like, you know, kind of the overarching, you know, theme of the movie. And he makes this design of himself that says no expectations. And so you want Miles to save Brooklyn, obviously. Like you want people not to die, but more importantly than that, like you want Miles to succeed.
Yeah. What did you not like?
Nothing. I literally cannot think of a single thing to say, like, earnestly. Like, there are some nitpicky things I could maybe come up with to be like, oh, I could change.
I wish a couple of characters had been a little more fleshed out.
Right, yeah.
That doesn't feel like a real complaint.
No,
to me, because it's fine the way it is.
Yeah, I wish it
Everything
were
works.
3 hours longer. Like, I wish this were like the part one of like a trilogy that we knew. I mean, obviously there's been like, you know, announcements of more animated movies, which thank God, I can't wait. But like, I wish, you know, that we knew immediately that like, okay, like this is part one, part two is coming out next year. You can't wait. Like that's my only complaint.
There's nothing.
No.
I don't have a single bad thing to say about this movie. Okay, well that was our many thoughts about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which I think we both agree is basically a 10 out of 10.
Yep.
Like one of my favorite superhero movies ever.
Definitely my favorite animated movie ever.
Yeah, easily one of the best movies of the year.
Yes, absolutely.
Loved every second of it. What did you think? The movie's out now, so I'm probably gonna go see it again immediately.
Yep.
And probably like it even more the second time. So tell us what you thought in the comments below. Hit us up on Twitter. I am @RogueCheddar.
I am @RustyPolished.
And thanks for watching.